I screamed inside my chest when Ethan whispered that loving Riley would make us stronger, yet I felt my ribs crack from the weight of that promise. I thought I agreed for love, not survival. Maya said, "I'll try. I'll trust you," but the words burn. The room smelled of whiskey and sweat, laughter spilling from lips that once kissed only me. I clung to the illusion of control, repeating rules like prayers, believing lines could save hearts. Riley's smile was sharp, unknowing or maybe knowing too much, as Ethan's eyes followed them instead of me. I tried to steady my breath, but each inhale dragged shards across my lung. I told myself love should expand, not wound, yet my body shook with quiet betrayal. The clock ticked too loudly, each second mocking me, each promise unraveling thread by thread. Ethan said, "This is freedom," but I only felt chains tightening. I realized in that moment, strength was a lie I had swallowed, and weakness was the only truth left pulsing in my veins. The morning after felt like waking on shattered glass. Ethan brewed coffee as if routine could erase the fracture in my chest. I sat at the table pretending to read messages, eyes blurring over meaningless words. He said, it wasn't what it looked like, but his voice cracked, betraying him. I wanted to ask why Riley's name tasted sweeter on his tongue than mine ever did, but I swallowed it down like poison. My reflection in the mug looked older, tired, carrying a burden no caffeine could fix. I thought of the night's silence, of rules ignored like fragile paper burned in fire. My chest ached with unspoken rage, yet I feared that speaking would shatter everything beyond repair. He brushed past me, fingers brushing my shoulder, a touch that felt foreign, diluted. I whispered inside myself, "Hold on," though my grip was already slipping. Later that day, I stared at Riley's name glowing on Ethan's phone screen. He said, "It's just a friend," with a casual laugh that didn't reach his eyes. The lie sliced through me sharper than truth ever could. I remembered our rules, no secrets, no hiding, and realized how quickly paper burns. My hand shook as I placed the phone back, pretending I hadn't seen, but my silence screamed louder than confrontation. The walls closed in, air thick as though I was suffocating under invisible hands. Ethan hummed a song, careless, and I envied his ability to move, as if my world wasn't collapsing. I smiled a broken smile, rehearsing strength, but each second chipped away at me. Dinner was a battlefield dressed as peace. Ethan laughed at Riley's joke across the table, and I felt invisible. Riley said, "I didn't mean to intrude," but her eyes challenged me, daring me to deny her place. My fork scraped the plate too loudly, each sound like thunder in the quiet room. The taste of food turned to ash in my mouth, bitterness overwhelming flavor. I studied Ethan's expression, softer for her than it had been for me in months. My stomach churned, not from food but from betrayal blooming in plain sight. I asked, "So, is this what stronger looks like?" My voice cracked like glass under pressure. Silence followed, heavier than any argument, and I wished it had been words instead of this suffocating void. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling as rain tapped the glass like a cruel metronome. Ethan's breathing was steady beside me, calm as if he hadn't torn my world apart. I whispered, "Do you still love me?" though I knew he couldn't hear. Memories of his promises replayed, words that once lit fire in me now only burned to ash. My chest rose and fell with sobs I swallowed, refusing to wake him, refusing to let my weakness show. Lightning flashed, illuminating the empty space between our bodies in bed. I realized we were already separated by more than air. We were divided by truth unspoken. My hands reached out, then curled back into fists. Love had become a battlefield I was losing alone. We tried to rebuild the illusion of control with rules written like commandments, taped to the fridge as if paper could bind hearts. Ethan said, "No sleepovers, no secrets, no comparisons," and I nodded, though my stomach turned. Riley laughed when she read them, calling it childish, yet she agreed with a shrug that made me ache. I believed in boundaries like sandbags against a flood, but already the water seeped through. Ethan's touch lingered on Riley's hand longer than the rules allowed. And though I noticed, I swallowed silence. Each promise felt less like protection and more like desperation, disguised as logic. I wanted to believe we could hold it together, but every smile between them made me question who these rules were really for. Him, her, or my crumbling sanity. The first dinner with rules in place felt staged, like actors reciting lines. Ethan said, "See, we can make this work," his fork clinking nervously against the plate. Riley raised her glass and replied, "To honesty," but her eyes gleamed with something sharper. I forced a smile, the taste of wine bitterer than before, my throat tight with suspicion. I wanted to believe the script would hold, yet every word sounded rehearsed, hollow. The air was too heavy with unspoken truths, and the candle between us flickered as if it knew the lie we were living. I laughed when they laughed, but the sound came out brittle, like broken glass scraping together. I realized boundaries can keep people apart, but they cannot force hearts to stay in line. Later that week, I found Ethan and Riley laughing on the balcony, voices carrying through the thin glass door. Ethan said, "She'll understand," and my heart collapsed. I pressed my ear closer, desperate, ashamed. Riley leaned against the railing, her laugh spilling into the night like freedom I could never feel. I stood in the kitchen, invisible, while they shared the stars without me. My chest burned with jealousy, but my feet froze, refusing to interrupt. I wanted to scream, to tear down the night, but instead I whispered to the silence, "Why am I always outside looking in?" I realized rules mean nothing when love chooses its own path. When we met to discuss boundaries again, the room felt like a courtroom. Ethan paced and said, "We just need clarity." Riley leaned forward, her voice sharp, "Or maybe you need control." I sat between them, hands trembling, wondering when love had turned into negotiations. The words flew like arrows, but none landed on truth. My chest tightened as I realized I wasn't a partner in this conversation. I was a referee, trying to keep two storms from colliding. I whispered, "I just want to feel safe," but no one heard me over their voices. The rules became chains for me, weapons for them, and I understood then that I was fighting to save something neither of them cared to protect. That night, I wrote in my journal, because words felt safer on paper than in the air. I scribbled, "I don't know if I'm enough," until the ink bled through the page. Ethan lay beside me, scrolling on his phone, detached, while I drowned in silent questions. Riley's shadow lingered in my mind, filling every corner. I thought of leaving, but fear anchored me to the bed, to the promise that maybe tomorrow would be different. My heart whispered lies of hope, while my body carried the truth of exhaustion. I realized love had become a war zone where I was both soldier and casualty, and the only one writing the history of my own defeat. I caught Ethan's lie the way you catch a shard of glass, small, sharp, and buried until it cuts. He said, "I'm meeting a friend for drinks," but Riley's name slipped in the pause between his words. My stomach twisted while I smiled like a good actress. I watched him adjust his shirt, check his reflection twice, something he never did for me anymore. My voice whispered, "Don't forget our rules," but my heart screamed louder than he could hear. His nod was careless, like promises were cheap currency he could spend freely. The door shut behind him, leaving me with silence that roared louder than thunder. I stared at the empty hallway, feeling as though betrayal had already walked through, wearing his skin. The hours dragged like chains, each minute pulling me deeper into dread. I sat on the couch staring at my phone, screen glowing with silence. Every vibration was a phantom, every sound in the hallway a false alarm. I whispered, "Please come home," though I knew he wasn't listening. The rules had said no secrets, no lies, but his absence became both. I thought of Riley's laugh, echoing in my skull, and wondered if he was hearing it now, softer and sweeter than mine. My chest throbbed with jealousy, every breath shallow. I clutched a pillow like it could hold me together. Time stretched, cruel and endless, until I realized I wasn't waiting for him. I was waiting for the truth to finally break me. When Ethan returned, His shirt smelled of perfume that wasn't mine. He said traffic was bad, avoiding my eyes as he slipped off his shoes. I stood frozen, rage boiling under my ribs, but my mouth refused to betray me. I wanted to scream, to tear the lies from his tongue, but silence won again. My body betrayed me with trembling hands, fists clenched so tightly the skin burned. He moved casually, humming, as though the world hadn't shifted beneath us. The scent lingered, sharp and undeniable, clinging to him like guilt. I whispered inside, "You chose her," though the words never left my lips. My love had become a cage, and I was the one holding the key but too afraid to use it. The next morning I confronted him with calm words that cut sharper than screams. I said, "Do you love her?" And his silence became the answer. He glanced away, lips pressed thin, and I felt the ground dissolve under me. Riley's shadow hung between us, heavier than furniture, heavier than breath. He muttered, "It's not what you think," but even he didn't believe it. My eyes blurred as I whispered, "Then tell me what it is." He reached for me, but my body recoiled like his touch carried fire. The rules we'd written together lay in my mind like ashes, meaningless now. I realized trust doesn't vanish in storms. It drowns slowly, breath by breath, until nothing remains but silence. That night, I dreamed of drowning, waves crashing against me as Ethan's voice echoed, "This will make us stronger." I woke gasping, soaked in sweat, heart racing with truth I couldn't deny. Riley wasn't just a guest in our love, she was a thief, welcomed by him, destroying me in silence. I lay there staring at the ceiling, realizing jealousy had consumed me like fire in dry wood. I whispered into the dark, "I am disappearing," but only the storm outside answered. The rain beat harder, each drop a reminder of cracks spreading through walls I couldn't hold together. I knew I was losing, not just him, but myself, piece by piece. The truth broke me not with screams, but with silence. I found Ethan's phone left unlocked, Riley's messages glowing like fire. She wrote, "Last night was perfect," followed by a heart. My body froze, my lungs refused to breathe. Every word I read was another nail in the coffin of us. He had promised rules, he had promised honesty, but these words were proof he had chosen her in secret. I whispered, "You lied," though he wasn't there to hear. My hands trembled as if holding lightning. My chest burned like open flame. Betrayal wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was written in pixels, undeniable. The worst part wasn't the message itself, but how normal it sounded, like love was never mine to hold. When Ethan returned, I confronted him, my voice sharp as broken glass. I said, "I saw your messages." His face drained of color, lips parted, no excuse ready. He muttered, "It's not what you think." But even he knew the lie collapsed under its own weight. I watched guilt spill across his face, and I hated that part of me still wanted him to deny it. Riley's name sat between us like a knife, cutting without being spoken. My hands shook, but my voice didn't. I repeated, "You chose her," and his silence agreed. In that moment, everything shattered. The rules, the trust, the illusion that love could survive betrayal. The world tilted, and I realized I had been living in ruins, pretending there were walls. He tried to reach for me, words spilling uselessly. "It was just once," he said, "but lies don't soften betrayal, they sharpen it." My chest cracked open, rage spilling like wildfire. I shouted, "You let her take what was mine," and the walls echoed my pain back at me. He stepped closer, but I backed away, the space between us growing wider than oceans. I saw his fear, but I no longer cared. Riley wasn't just part of us. She was the fracture he chose to deepen. The silence after my words was heavier than thunder. I realized forgiveness wasn't an option, not when truth was a knife twisted so deep. My love had become ashes in my mouth. The next day, Riley appeared uninvited, her presence a storm I could not stop. She said, "He loves me too," with eyes bold, daring me to deny reality. My body shook, but my voice came calm. "You can't steal what was already given away." Ethan stood between us, torn, his silence damning him more than words ever could. Riley's confidence cut deeper than any blade, her smirk reminding me she wasn't guilty, she was chosen. I realized I wasn't fighting her, I was fighting him, and I had already lost. My voice cracked as I whispered, "You were supposed to protect us, but the air swallowed it whole." In that moment, I saw myself not as a partner but as a ghost. That night, the house felt hollow, every corner echoing with betrayal. I lay on the floor, clutching the rug, sobbing soundlessly. Ethan hovered near the doorway, unable to step closer, guilt carved into his face. I whispered, "You destroyed us," though my voice barely carried. He said nothing, and his silence felt like a confession carved in stone. Riley's shadow lingered even when she wasn't there, her presence haunting every breath. My chest ached with grief so deep it felt endless. Love had not made us stronger. It had stripped me bare, left me weaker than I had ever been. The rules, the promises, the dreams, they were ashes now. Only truth remained, sharp and merciless. The house erupted with words sharper than knives. I screamed, "You broke me," my voice shaking the walls. Ethan shouted back, "I never meant to hurt you," but his excuses only fueled my rage. Riley stood behind him, her silence heavy, her eyes filled with something close to victory. My chest heaved as though every breath was fire, my fists trembling with fury I could no longer swallow. I wanted him to feel the weight of every lie, every betrayal carved into my bones. He tried to reach me, but I stepped back, choking on tears and fury. Love had dissolved into war, and there was no peace left to claim. My scream fractured into silence, the kind that breaks more than words ever could. I hurled his phone across the room, the crash echoing like thunder. "Every promise is dust," I spat, my hands shaking. Ethan bent to pick it up, but his face crumbled when he saw the shattered screen. He muttered, "We can fix this," as though glass and trust could be mended the same way. Riley finally spoke, her voice soft yet cruel. "Maybe she doesn't want to be saved." The words pierced me deeper than the betrayal itself. My chest tightened as though the air had abandoned me. I shouted, "Get out," but I wasn't sure who I meant it for. Him, her, or myself. The silence that followed was heavier than the crash, a silence that promised nothing would ever return to what it was. My voice cracked as I screamed, "Choose now." The demand sliced through the air, leaving no room for escape. Ethan froze, his eyes darting between us like a man drowning, searching for air. Riley smirked faintly, her confidence unshaken, as though she already knew the answer. My body shook with rage, tears streaming down my cheeks, each drop branding my skin. He whispered, "I can't." And the weight of those words crushed me harder than any confession. My knees nearly buckled, the room spinning with betrayal and exhaustion. I realized I had been waiting for a choice he never intended to make. My voice lowered into a whisper of defeat. "Then you already did." The fight broke into sobs, my voice torn raw. Ethan dropped into the armchair, burying his face in his hands, his shoulders trembling. Riley placed a hand on his back, and the sight ripped me apart. I screamed, "Don't touch him," but she didn't move. My body shook with fury, my throat burning, my fists aching for release. He said nothing, his silence an admission more painful than words. I collapsed onto the couch, sobbing into my hands, my body convulsing with the weight of every wound. Love had turned into ashes, and all I could taste was smoke. The air felt poisoned, thick with betrayal, and I realized I no longer knew who I was without this pain. The climax was not a scream but a whisper. I lifted my head, eyes swollen, voice broken, and said, "I can't survive this anymore." Ethan looked up, his face streaked with tears, but his silence told me he already knew. Riley shifted uncomfortably, her confidence fading for the first time. I stood slowly, legs trembling, but my voice steady. "This is the end," I said, each word final, each syllable heavy as stone. The house was quiet, save for the storm outside, the rain beating against the glass like a drum of mourning. I walked toward the door, my body weak, but my will finally unshackled. Love had broken me, but in its wreckage, I had found the only truth left. Leaving was survival. The morning after my decision, the house felt hollow, stripped of the life it once carried. I moved slowly, packing a small bag, each item a reminder of promises broken. Ethan lingered in the hallway, his silence louder than apologies could ever be. He whispered, "Don't go," but the words lacked the fire of love. They were ashes drifting in the air. I didn't answer because there was nothing left to say. My heart was bruised beyond repair, but at least my steps carried me towards something that resembled freedom. The walls watched quietly as if they had heard too many lies, and were relieved for the silence to come. I zipped the bag and breathed deeply, feeling pain and relief intertwine. The kitchen was quiet, sunlight spilling through blinds, cutting across the floor in sharp lines. I sat with a coffee mug, staring at the rising steam as though answers might appear in its swirls. Ethan sat opposite, hands clasped, lips parted but unable to speak. I whispered, "I don't trust you anymore," and his eyes closed like he was bracing for impact. The silence between us stretched wider than oceans. I could hear Riley's laughter in memory, echoing louder than the birds outside. I wanted to believe we could still fix it, but some fractures never heal. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away, my fingers curling around the mug instead. My voice steadied as I whispered, "It's over." Walking through the city streets, I felt like a ghost among strangers. The world continued as if my heartbreak didn't matter, as if betrayal wasn't written across my face. Cars honked, people laughed, life kept moving while mine had shattered. I whispered to myself, "Keep walking," because stopping meant sinking. The cool air cut my cheeks, a strange comfort against the heat of my grief. Every window I passed reflected my hollow eyes, reminding me of the woman I had become, fragile but still moving. My feet ached, my body tired, but I carried the weight anyway. For the first time I realized survival isn't beautiful, it's brutal. And yet, I was still alive. That evening, I sat in a small cafe, journal open, pen trembling in my hand. I wrote, "He loved her more," then crossed it out, then wrote it again. The truth burned, but the page absorbed it without judgment. Around me, people laughed, couples leaned close, and the sound tore at me like knives. I sipped bitter coffee, letting the taste anchor me. For once I wasn't crying. I was empty but steady. I realized that pain doesn't disappear. It transforms, becoming part of you like a scar. My heart ached, but it beat. My voice whispered into the page, "I'm still here." It was the smallest victory, but it was mine. That night, I stood alone on the balcony of a rented room, the city lights sprawling beneath me like a galaxy. The wind whipped my hair across my face, cool against swollen eyes. I whispered, "I will not break," though my voice cracked. The sky was vast, endless, reminding me I was small but not erased. Every breath I took felt heavier but also freer, as though grief was loosening its grip little by little. I clutched the railing, steadying myself against the storm inside me. The betrayal still throbbed, but beneath it, a seed of resolve pulsed quietly. Love had destroyed me, but survival was reshaping me. I wasn't healed, but I was standing, and for now, that was enough. The silence in my new room felt heavier than any argument. I sat on the floor surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, breathing in dust and loneliness. My body ached, my heart screamed, but there was no one to hear. I whispered, "This is survival," though it felt like defeat. The air was cold, unfamiliar, but it didn't carry his scent anymore, and that was enough to remind me I was free, even if freedom hurt. I scrolled through old photos, Ethan's smile pressed against mine, Riley absent but always looming in hindsight. Each image felt like a lie frozen in time. My chest tightened as I deleted them one by one, tears blurring the screen. I whispered, "You don't get to live here anymore," as if erasing pixels could erase the ache. But as the gallery emptied, the weight lightened. Love had ended, but the story didn't have to haunt me forever. On the street below, couples walked hand in hand, laughter echoing like a language I no longer understood. I leaned against the railing, heart heavy, whispering, "I used to believe in forever." My reflection in the glass door showed a woman I barely recognized, stronger in her cracks, though fragile still. The night wind carried voices, but none belonged to him. For the first time, I let the silence answer, and it didn't kill me. It only reminded me that survival was louder than absence. I sat with my journal again, the same words spilling like wounds. I was not enough. Then I paused, pen shaking, and crossed them out. Instead I wrote, "I was too much for the wrong love." The truth hit like lightning. My worth wasn't measured by betrayal. The ink bled into the page, my hands trembling, but my chest lightened. For the first time, the pain didn't drown me. It became proof that I had survived. The final blow wasn't anger but acceptance. I stood before the mirror, swollen eyes reflecting a stranger I was still learning to know. I whispered, "He broke me, but he doesn't get to keep me broken." My voice cracked, but it was mine. The storm inside me quieted, leaving scars, but also resolve. Love had failed, but I hadn't. The echo of betrayal lingered, but so did the promise that I could rebuild. And in that moment, the silence became my sanctuary, not my prison.